one of the results out of this was a group of people who created the Safety Passport program in Hollywood. Okay, it was a bunch of safety people at the time. It was before I was involved. I was just starting my career, and that was coming out of that was how can the employers provide safety training for the employees? This is a good segue into the training side. Do you want to say something first?
Well, I think any accident in any industry is going to lead to different processes and changes for the better. I think we saw it back there. I think the Safety Pass program, which has been around for a while, but is a really big achievement because you've got all the major employers signing off on a certain standard of training, which is a big deal. And in 2003, make that required for people to go to work is also a huge deal because you don't want to run out of workers. I mean, you got to get everybody through a timeline in a short period of time, and that's a lot. Credit goes to the unions for also buying into that process. In 2003, I think something like 40 or 50,000 people went through a short timeline to get their safety training up to speed. That's a lot of people to put through, curriculum. Kent was involved with the curriculum. The studio safety reps, the studio executives were all part of developing this curriculum, which has led to Safety Pass, the iteration that it is today. So uniform, standardized training, certainly that was something the industry recognized as having a need for, and that philosophy just continues to grow. And it is a good segue because that's the situation in LA. Across the states now, through the IA Training Trust Fund, there's a rollout of curriculum. Some of it is Safety Pass, some of it will be developed separately. But the A and the A2, which is the general safety course, is being rolled out now. It's an online course that most of the United States are able to take, most of the IA crew and possibly other people. So that's the next iteration, the next phase of awareness training for crew. So hopefully you guys see more of that out there, and hopefully you're checking the database, checking with the IATTF to make sure crew has been trained. I know they're promoting it heavily in areas like Georgia. Well, the Safety Pass program the Safety Pass program is 30 some courses. They range from 56 hours for a Jenny operator, 49 hours for a grip. Mark would actually know some of this. So extensive amount of training for the crew. Even the director of photography has, I think, 14 hours of training. And it's standardized uniform curriculum that everybody has to take to be placed on the roster, to be kept on the industry experience roster. To be placed, you have to take the general safety course and work 30 days in the industry and do some other things. But to be kept on the roster, you have to take your required courses. If the union or the producers identify a classification as needing a certain class, they'll get together, they'll agree on it, they'll put a timeline in place, could be 3 months, 6-month timeline.
Well, and also the collaboration, there are times that the union members will decide that we feel that there's a hazard that we haven't really thought was a hazard, and now they ask that their skill level gets put into another class. So you add those classes. When they started having the lighting balloons, okay, and diffusion balloons, there were an awful lot of us, like grips, didn't have to take the compressed gas class for how you're dealing with compressed gases. And now we do, because when you're using a balloon for diffusion, you need to know to use a regulator on that bottle of helium. So that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean the courses are developed by labor management. They have the expertise of a lot of years of experience that go into them. It's a really sort of platinum standard of training. Now that system doesn't translate out here, you know, in the same way. Right now, that iteration was with the IA Training Trust Fund. Studios do their own training per production. There's different ways that that's being managed. There isn't the roster system out here like there is in LA, but it's moving across the states. It's trying to get general safety awareness. And that class that people take here is the same class that people take in LA. It's been a nationalized curriculum. Question.
I'll do a real quick because this is a 4-hour class by itself. Okay, the Contract Services Safety Pass program is a contractually negotiated training that only the production unions in LA with studios take it, the people. So Teamsters, laborers, the people who do things that do it in LA County under the basic agreement. Okay, and it's a contracted deal. The other training that's being done now through the Area Standards Agreement is through the Ias Training Trust Fund, which is only 7 years old, and it's been something we've been pushing for because the obligation for training goes to employers. But the union sees a reason we don't want our members hurt. So we've been doing something to help it. So the laws or what's going on is it's going to take a while to get all the training up to speed for the area standards. But the laws in the United States of America is anybody who works under a IA contract that contributes, or they've worked for an employer who works under an IA contract that contributes to the trust fund, they can take the class. So in a right to work state, if you've got an IA contract and you have workers who are union, non-union, they can take advantage of the classes. And that's federal labor law that makes that's what has to happen. Okay? Yes, sir. Yeah, it's only 2 classes, and while this program is really great, sometimes Matt and I have a little disagreement of how much better it could be. But I also see things that I want this always, and Matt knows that, and I know that we're taking steps to get it, and that's good. So we're doing the steps. So yes, you can take those 2 classes, but the local here also offers classes. They offer certain classes to do things. One of the things that people want to do all the time, and you have to be a little careful, and you as producers at least need to know this. There are very few certifications that exist that are required by law. How many of you are scuba divers? Okay, how many of you are certified scuba divers? How many of you are required to be a certified scuba diver for Osha? Osha does not require recreational scuba diving certification for work. You're required to be trained. And the reason is that your certification is a recreational cert that has nobody who is overseeing it. All of you who went to high school and college, those were accredited programs that allowed your credits from high school to go to the college. But certification programs like the ETCP, the Entertainment Technician Certification Program, which I sit on the board of, their rigging certifications and their electric certification for the entertainment industry are accredited. There's an accrediting agency that oversees how it gets done. But we even mentioned for Mark that they didn't say he's a certified OSHA instructor, outreach instructor, because OSHA doesn't certify almost anything. He's authorized. I'm an authorized instructor. I don't give out certifications. Mark doesn't give out certifications. He gives out completion cards. He's authorized to do that. Okay? So it's even for forklifts. Okay? You send somebody out to a forklift and they go through a class with Hertz, whoever's supplying your forklifts. The certification is that they're supposed to come back and show their employer that they're qualified and that they're doing it. And the employer certifies them. That's what it says in the OSHA rules. Yeah. Well, I don't know what the local's doing. So the training that's there is going to the rental houses, okay? Do you guys have training for the Jenny's training? So you want to?
All right, another shameless plug for myself. Okay. We have, and since the 90s, had an Osha Training Institute. So we are an authorized outreach trainer as per Osha. So the National Osha gives us the authorization to provide any of the training programs that are listed in their catalog as if we were Osha. And so I brought catalogs there, and so we have a variety of trainings. These are geared towards you, the producers, not all of the employees. So we're gearing them towards managers, producers, safety and health compliance officers on site. They are meant for you to gain the knowledge and then turn around and disseminate it to your employees. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. We have certificate programs. They're great if you want to have something to add to your resume as well. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
And just a quick thing about certification certificates. A certificate program isn't without value. Scuba diving industry just created this certification that has a great deal of value. It's just it's enforced through its industry. Okay, so it has value. So just don't think that just because it doesn't say it's not a real certification, it's not valuable. Yeah. They do through me. Yeah, I've actually did it here once. Yes. So there's places to go and get training. You can get the consultants sometimes have training. If you have a studio, they have training that they can give. I've been seeing there are times out there now that I don't know who's always putting it together. Sometimes it's a studio, sometimes it's a consultant, is before you go onto a set, they give you an iPad that you have to look at. I was doing a thing, there was a Fox deal where a guy jumped out of a helicopter without a parachute and aimed for this big net. Evidently it was great big production that caused all this complaint, but nobody ever heard about it. But before you left the parking for visitors and crew, you had to sit through this iPad presentation before you could go into where the parachuters were falling out of the sky. And so that's one thing. A lot of places, the employer is giving an iPad that's like an hour-long presentation, which is general safety plan that the employees have to sit through. So while they're there, during pre-production, they're given this, that they're able to do the class. There are lots of people who can do training.
Also, if you sign up on the website for the City of Savannah, they occasionally will offer free OSHA 10 training that is geared to the productions. So that's a great resource. I mean, it's a little bit of a drive, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, and I'm just available to
Yeah, I think it's only to, well, if the employer, well, because they're online courses, the A and the A2. So they're online courses. I don't believe they would, unless you're an IA member, they wouldn't be available to them. I don't know how they're handling that yet, if it's come up there yet. So, because it's only been in the contract for 2 years now, and it's only been implemented for about 6 months.
Yeah. And there might be other ways to offer that to communities outside the IATTF as well.
Certainly, technically, the Training Trust Fund, because it's a proper Department of Labor ERISA trust fund, any class that a person putting into the trust fund wants to do could request to have help and reimbursement from that class, technically. So if I go do rigging classes for usually theater locals, but I did it for the local here. I did a entertainment rigging 2-day, 16-hour rigging class for the locals down here. It was both for the stage local and for the theater, or for the movie local. And it was paid for, reimbursed by the local. The local is the one who asked for it, but I believe that because it's a labor management, that a management could ask for the funds. Is that you do trust fund? I would think that's possible. The worst they would say if you called the trust fund is no. So asking for it.
I'm just curious though, for those who are crewing up, what do you guys look for? What do you have a process that you're looking for a trained crew, or are there checks and balances on that, or just sort of not sure? Okay.
One of the biggest things with all of this is we're trying to get better. It's been a long time coming. Even when I talked about the safety passport, that was a predecessor which was voluntary before the safety pass became mandatory. So it's in a process. It's working for it. And OSHA, which Mark had talked about, what qualification, the definition of qualification, isn't always training, although OSHA really pushes training. So one of the other things in your due diligence is asking for people's resume. You know, is this their first barbecue, or have they done this before? Have they done it badly in your research of finding out what's going on? Safety meetings can be part of training. You're telling people this is what we're going to do today. You don't have to go through all real big and elaborate training if you're only having your crew do some small little piece of some task. They need to be trained to do that task within the limits of the task. So yeah.
Let's say you're hiring, is there a way that you can, is there a way that you can find out who's in violation of OSHA? So let's say I want to bring on a producer, and it turns out this guy has done everything you could think of without being blacklisted. You know, how do I find out those things?
Really tough question because, oh, I'm sorry, gosh darn it. Trip hazard. The clumsiness hazard. One of the bad things is OSHA's set up for like local or 300 logs and other things like that that are supposed to be reported. A lot of times you go to work for a production company that only exists to make that movie, right? And as soon as the movie's done, all the assets and liabilities get bought up by somebody else who's going to distribute the movie, okay? So how do you don't have a trail of bad players? It's really hard to have a trail of bad players. And so I can't give you a good answer. The good and the bad is it's a small community. Okay, the bad part of that is if we're talking about somebody being bad, we're now committing a crime by libeling them.
Well, you have a producers guild. This is the benefits you do have is you'll develop your network of calling up people to find out who has had problems, who's not had problems. That's why you create a community of reliable people you can call upon. We are trying very hard to do that and be of service to you that way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, their resume, gets built up like really big, like you're doing all kinds of really great stuff because we look at the finished product when they may not be very good at what they do. I happen to work on Forrest Gump. Everybody goes, oh, Forrest Gump, Forrest Gump was not much different in how we worked on it. It wasn't special while we were doing it. It was the same as working on Friday the 13th Part 6. We were getting peeled in the jungles of Georgia or in the jungles of South Carolina. It wasn't like, so you can't always depend on that resume either. So sometimes you got to find and call and talk to people who've worked with the person before and get a feeling for what they've done. So
before we get off training, there is for the DGA, through the Directors Guild Producer Training Program, there's classes that are held throughout the U.S. They've done one in Atlanta. They do them in Louisiana. They do various ones. Contract Services has a staff that'll come out and teach the class.
Yeah.
Bob Lewis.
Also, Darla, who's from Local 600, Local 600 being a national local, they can have more classes because through the Safety Pass program. So the 600 people, do all of you remember, all the people here have the Safety Pass training? Not all of them, okay? But if they had anything going on in LA, then they could have their Safety Pass card. Yes, sir?
I was on a job recently where, and I'm just wondering what the protocol is here, if you're in any bad waters being a bad player where someone who isn't on your crew, say you're shooting on a construction site and you're shooting for some company, and one of their guys is a qualified operator of like a lift or something, and your camera guy's like, ooh, I want to go up on this lift and get a shot. You know, we put the camera guy in the harness, he's volunteering, this guy says he's qualified, you know, maybe he doesn't have credentials on hand right away, but you know, he's with the company, and this might be getting into liability, I don't know, but I'm just wondering what, have water there?
Well, it can be, and we're going to have a section on dealing with outside contractors, because how can you have control over the other person's employees? And what OSHA would say is that you should have had a conversation at least about whether these people are qualified, and you're going to supply us with people who know how to do this stuff and have the training, whatever it is that gets into the contractual liability, which I hate, okay? So the safety part of it is you have to do what it takes to protect your employee. Worrying about whether that person's trained or not, you decide based on the contract you have.
Okay, this young lady had it.
Oh, sorry.
So once you do the training, if you do safety training, do you have to have any type of recertification or?
Sometimes.
On some of it. Some of it is OSHA required, like forklift operators have to be recertified every 2 or 3 years. In the industry, motion picture industry, it's every 3 years. So we see the same Teamsters going through every 3 years. Other things, no. As far as the boom lifts, we are now recertifying, re-educating because the standards have changed, the machines have changed. So we now have everybody in LA rolling through who have to take that, to take the, what we call the B class over for boom lifts and scissor lifts. And those are some of the more notorious things, as I have found, because the only time in my 38 years of working that I ever had to fire somebody was someone who had a card from the Condor company. It said, I'm a certified Condor operator. And he was one of the most dangerous mofos I ever saw, and he couldn't lay cable without shocking himself. He couldn't do anything else. We had to bring him down because he had perched himself and he was teetering. He was on 2 wheels and he was 80 feet on the stick. And I thought, well, I'll bring him down. Oh, but if it goes over while I'm at the controls, they're going to nail me. So we just talked him down. We said, don't look down, don't talk, and lean to the left and do what we tell you. We got him down and said, I'm sorry, you're just unsafe at any speed. But so even with that card, they make mistakes. So there needs to be, and we're slowly, and that's the operative word, getting into recertifying or re-educating, I should say. We don't certify, but re-educating people for certain things, especially with large machinery and stuff like that. So,
And some of these questions might be better suited for OSHA if they're literally OSHA interpretation questions, and we can talk about that later.
Other training, it was brought up to me that maybe not everybody realizes, or we didn't make it strong enough, is that the safety pass classes is a specific contractual set of classes that only people who are involved with the basic agreement between the IA and other locals in Hollywood and the studios can take, okay? Just to let people know. Now, those classes, because they are safety classes, for the most part, are not different than you can take other places. Even the ones that are more industry specific, the people who set up the training trust fund for the IA, which I was one of them, we teach classes that would be very similar. Because again, it's the same stuff. It's not rocket science, it's not different. It's the same stuff. So there are places you can find people who do the classes, that do all these different classes. Just realize that it's going to take a while, okay? The amount of time that's necessary for all the classes and all that going into it. And what we wanted to stress when we were having our meetings to have this is, again, doing your due diligence. What are you doing in trying to make sure that your crew is safe? Having, looking into the qualifications, having training. Safety meetings are part of it, because one of the great things about what we do, and in trying to do, people ask me, well, what do you do for training? And it's doing classes with OSHA people, is, well, we do the normal training you would need for any occupational health and safety, but don't we send our workers onto the decks of aircraft carriers to shoot montages for things? Those people need training. Now, it's not training that contract services is ever going to do, because how many people have ever had to go do that work? But there would have to be training done specifically for that group of people. The dolly grip for Forrest Gump ended up getting a call while we were doing it to go do Apollo 13. And they did 120 or 130 drops in the Vomit Comet. And man, I wanted that job so bad. And he had to go through a physical and training to be able to go up in the Vomit Comet and be able to do that work. So those are things that are part of it.
Specifically, had the opportunity to work on Top Gun a number of years ago. And the safety training that we got from the sailors was very brief. You can stand here and shoot. You can't stand there. And we said, well, why not? You'll die. End of safety meeting. Okay, so we're near the steam-powered catapults, and the steam enough, if you get close enough to it, will just cook you in place. They've had people burned to death on the decks before. So it can be a very brief safety meeting. Good, bad. Okay, go with good. Okay.
Another thing I also wanted to recognize or introduce Dharma Jackson, who's a safety trainer from Leaf Life Learning. And so she's local and she does safety training. She's OSHA authorized. So there's a lot of resources, and we're going to go into them specifically shortly about the Georgia-specific resources that are available.
And a quick point on this slide, the qualified. You as the producer, you're going to hire people that are qualified, right? And we've gone in depth as to how they may get their qualifications through safety pass training, through other training here or there. But when you're interviewing someone to be your key grip or whatever, how do you know if they're qualified? You do what I'm doing. You ask them. And hopefully they will tell you and the truth, okay? And if you're going to put them in a condor, an aerial boom lift, and you say, you know, Bob, how many times have you done this? And he says, well, when I do this one and one more, that'll be 2. You probably don't want to hire that guy to be on that particular job, okay? So you need to vet them to make sure they are qualified. And if they're not, then you need to either get them some of that training or don't hire them, okay? Because you don't want them to be on the, earn while you learn type program. You want them to be knowledgeable about what they're doing.
And with that, you'd asked a question about when you need to retrain people. And it's very weird because a lot of this training, as Mark had said, there is no retraining. There's just a few of them that require retraining by the law. But the law also says the part of the qualification is I've demonstrated my ability to handle the problem safely. So if I get trained today and tomorrow I do it unsafely, I need to be retrained. So that's part of the thing too, is you're evaluating what the workers are doing and whether they're doing it right. And as a labor guy, an awful lot of time, they want to have the laws. If you don't follow the rules, you're going to get disciplined or you're going to get laid off. In fact, almost all the safety classes, it says, you have the possibility of being laid off. Part of safety training is just retrain the person. They call it putting in a safety jail, but if they're doing something wrong, is train them. Send them someplace and train them. You have to evaluate, what they're doing, whether they're doing it wrong and those things, but give them training for it.